My name is Megan, and I'm 33 years old. I married Julian 4 years ago, and from the very beginning, his mother Eleanor made it clear that my daughter Zoe didn't belong in the family the way her real grandchildren did. Zoe was 6 when Julian and I got married, born from a relationship before I met him, and I had hoped that time would soften Eleanor's coldness toward her. It never did. Every holiday, every family dinner, I watched Eleanor dote on Julian's sister's kids while barely glancing at Zoe. I told myself it was just an adjustment period. I was wrong. Julian's 40th birthday was supposed to be a celebration. I spent 3 weeks planning it, booking a private room at his favorite restaurant, ordering a custom cake shaped like the vintage guitar he'd always wanted but never bought himself. Zoe, who is 7 now, had made him a card with glitter glue that took her 2 nights to finish because she wanted every letter perfect. She was so proud of that card. She held it against her chest the entire car ride to the restaurant, telling me she couldn't wait to see Daddy's face. We arrived early to help set up. Eleanor and Julian's father, Robert, were already there, along with Julian's sister Vanessa and her 2 children. The room looked beautiful. Round tables draped in navy blue, string lights along the ceiling, and a long table set up for the kids near the window. I noticed the kids' table only had 2 place settings, but I assumed someone would add a third once we sat down. I was wrong about that too. When I asked Eleanor about the seating, she looked at me like I'd said something absurd. She said the kids' table was for Vanessa's children because they were Julian's actual nieces and nephews, and that Zoe would be more comfortable in the side room near the entrance, away from the family. She said it so casually, like she was describing a scheduling conflict rather than telling a 7-year-old she wasn't welcome at her own stepfather's birthday party. I told her that wasn't happening, that Zoe would sit with us or at the kids' table with her cousins like she always did. Eleanor's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. She walked away, and I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. 20 minutes later, while I was in the restroom fixing Zoe's hair clip, I heard commotion outside. I stepped out and saw Eleanor standing over Zoe near the entrance, her hand gripping my daughter's small shoulder, physically steering her out of the main dining room toward the side hallway. Zoe was clutching her birthday card, her eyes wide and confused, her feet stumbling as Eleanor pushed her forward. I heard Eleanor say, low but sharp, that this room was for family only, and that Zoe needed to wait outside until the real children finished eating. I don't remember crossing the room. I remember grabbing Zoe and pulling her against me, feeling her small body shaking, and I remember the way the entire restaurant seemed to go quiet around us. Other guests were staring. Vanessa's kids had stopped eating. Robert sat frozen at the head table, saying nothing, doing nothing, the way he always did whenever Eleanor crossed a line. I asked Eleanor what she thought she was doing, and she said, without even a flicker of shame, that Zoe wasn't blood, and that she had every right to decide who sat in her son's celebration. That's when Julian walked in from the parking lot, still in the process of taking off his jacket, and found his mother standing in front of his crying stepdaughter while his wife shook with fury in the middle of the restaurant. I watched his face change. I watched him look at Zoe's tear-streaked cheeks, at the crumpled birthday card still clutched in her fist, at his mother's unapologetic expression, and something in him shifted in a way I had never seen before. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He walked past his mother without a word, knelt down in front of Zoe, and gently took the card from her hands, smoothing out the creased corner where Eleanor's grip had bent it. Then he stood up, turned to face the entire room, his parents, his sister, every guest who had come to celebrate him, and he said something that made his mother's face go white and his father's fork freeze halfway to his mouth. He said he wanted everyone in that room to hear this clearly, because he was only going to say it once. He said that Zoe was his daughter, not by blood, but by every choice that actually mattered, every school drop-off, every skin knee he'd bandaged, every bedtime story he'd read in a silly voice until she fell asleep laughing. He said that a person who thought family was only about DNA didn't understand what family meant at all. He looked directly at his mother and told her that if she couldn't treat Zoe with the same love and respect she gave Vanessa's children, then she wouldn't be welcome at any future family event, birthday or otherwise. The room was completely silent. Eleanor opened her mouth to respond, but Julian raised a hand, not unkindly, but firmly, and said he wasn't finished. He turned to his father next, and his voice cracked slightly, not from anger, but from something deeper, years of disappointment finally surfacing. He asked Robert how many times he had sat back and watched his mother humiliate a child without saying a single word in protest. He said silence was its own kind of cruelty, and that from now on, he expected both of his parents to either accept Zoe fully or step back from their lives entirely. Robert's face flushed red, and for the first time in the 4 years I had known him, he looked like he wanted to disappear into his chair. He mumbled something about not realizing it had gotten this bad, but Julian just shook his head slowly, like he'd heard that excuse too many times before. Vanessa, to her credit, stood up and pulled her own children closer to Zoe, inviting her to sit between them at the kids' table without hesitation. Her youngest, a boy named Theo, scooted over and patted the seat beside him, asking Zoe if she wanted to see the drawing he'd made for Uncle Julian. It was such a small gesture, but I watched Zoe's shoulders relax for the first time since Eleanor had grabbed her, and I felt my own chest loosen slightly. Not everyone in that family had failed her. Just the two people who should have known better. Eleanor, still pale, tried one more time to defend herself, saying she was only trying to keep tradition, that family dinners had always been for blood relatives first. Julian cut her off before she could finish, his voice quiet but absolutely unshakable. He told her that tradition wasn't an excuse for cruelty, and that he refused to raise Zoe in a family that made her feel like a guest in her own life. He said if Eleanor couldn't understand that, then maybe it was time she spent some real time thinking about what mattered more to her, being right, or being present in her grandchildren's lives, all of them without exception. The rest of the dinner was tense, but different. Robert quietly moved to sit near Zoe for a few minutes, asking her about school, about her favorite subject, clumsy but sincere in a way I hadn't seen from him before. Eleanor sat mostly silent, picking at her food, occasionally glancing toward Zoe with an expression I couldn't quite read, somewhere between shame and stubborn pride. She didn't apologize that night. I didn't expect her to. Some people need more than one uncomfortable dinner to unlearn a lifetime of favoritism, but something had cracked open in that room, and I don't think it was going to close back up quietly. Before we left, Julian knelt down again in front of Zoe and told her that the card she made him was the best birthday present he had ever received, and that he was going to keep it on his desk at work so he could see it every single day. Zoe's whole face lit up, and she wrapped her arms around his neck so tightly he laughed and nearly toppled backward. Watching them together, I felt something settle inside me that had been unsettled for 4 years, a quiet certainty that no matter what Eleanor thought about blood and belonging, Julian had already made his choice, and he had made it in front of everyone who needed to hear it. Driving home that night, Zoe fell asleep in the back seat still holding the wrapping paper from Julian's gift, and Julian reached over and took my hand without saying anything. We didn't need to talk about what happened. It had already been said, clearly, publicly, and permanently. Eleanor may not have transformed overnight, but the family dynamic had shifted in a way that couldn't be undone. My daughter would never again be told to wait outside while someone else's children ate at the table, not while Julian had anything to say about it, and after that night, I believed him completely. If this story moved you the way it moved me to write it, please hit subscribe and join our community, because we have so many more real, powerful stories like this one coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one.